One of the primary aspects of any civilization has been agriculture. This is something which is very vital to humanity, and we have seen all civilizations thrive near rivers, giving us food, giving us sustenance, and giving us everything that is required. Agriculture is a very important aspect. Now, in this edition of the podcast, we are talking about a few of the uncertainties and difficulties faced by farmers, what influences them towards growing a certain crop. Is technology helping them? Some of the lesser known challenges, and also what happens to the produce. And finally, we'll be looking at the impact that climate change has on farming. And of course, to talk to us about all of this, allow me to bring in Uma, our expert, who's been working with the farming community in India for more than 10 years and also has been a knowledge partner for many initiatives across the globe. Everything that will be shared in this podcast comes from her experience, and while we are having a brief discussion, every single topic of discussion can and will be a podcast edition in itself. Firstly, let me ask you, from your personal experience traveling across the country and working with all of the farming community, what has been one of the biggest takeaways for you?
What I have observed is, in our country, there are many small and fragmented farmers and large, small land holdings. So the farmers have to really gear up, but still with all these at the back end, we are the agriculture powerhouse. We are the second largest producers of the staple food, that is rice and wheat, across the globe. And we are also the first largest producer of milk, jute, pulses. So India plays a very big role in agriculture produce, and our GDP, it constitutes about 20%, more than 20% agriculture and allied sectors. So a lot of people have their livelihood from this agriculture. So they are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. So with this and the ideal climatic conditions that are prevailing in our country, so with all the availability of natural resources, which is also very, very important. So these are the main things why India is the largest I can say it's a powerhouse of agriculture. And secondly, the farmers, they face a lot of hardship because of the fragmented land holdings, and they have to have the seeds, the manures, the fertilizers, the biocides, the irrigation, and there's lack of mechanization in our country. The farmers have to bear the brunt of soil erosion, where there is no knowledge partner or a direct mentor to help them out in these hardships that they face. And agriculture marketing is one of the main important things that needs to be established in a very proper manner. And also the scarcity of capital are the major problems that I see that the farmers are facing across India.
Indeed, India, when it comes to the production and the role that agriculture plays in the economy, is very significant. And looking globally in itself, the country is a huge producer of so many vital products that are required. Now, before you started working with the farmers, like most of us, you were a customer or a consumer who would often purchase fruits, vegetables, grains, and everything that is required. But now that you have seen and been on the other side, do you feel that most of us who are not aware of how farming is done and what goes into it, do you think that we are aware of how difficult farming is and how much uncertainty there is revolving around farming?
Yeah, exactly. Very few people are aware of the hardships because most of the consumers are not aware because lack of time, or they're busy with their lives. They have their own life day in and day out. They have to, have some livelihood. So they are engaged in their own way. But people who are engaged with farmers and who are working with farmers like NGOs, then we have the agriculture department officials who engage with for the welfare of the farmers, and also the scientists who work to better the inputs and the production, hybridization. Apart from these people, most of the consumers, as you mentioned, are not aware of the uncertainties that a farmer faces in terms of crop loss, disease, pest attack, climate change. Now, climate change, at least it has caught up At least this term people understand now. But when it comes to really seeing that on the ground, so most of us do not understand how it affects the farmer's livelihood. So this climate change is also taking a very big toll, and the soil erosion, which is the main thing, the lack of nutrition and the loss of biodiversity. These are various things that a normal consumer, he will not understand all these things. Also, there is not much of awareness among most of us about what the farmers do, the farming sector, the hardships. These are all not publicized nor made aware to the consumers. And the farmer has to bear the brunt as well as match the consumer's preferences. This is the irony here, where they need to continuously meet the demand, rising demand for food and higher quality of food. So when you demand such things, naturally you have to invest a lot of money, which is lacking in the farming sector, and also to satisfy the consumers, which the taste continuously changes, the changing taste and expectations of the consumers. So there is a lot of gap between the consumers and the producers in this aspect.
And one of the things that we see in mainstream media are stories where we have people from different educational backgrounds. For example, somebody who studied engineering, maybe even working in a company for a few years, then decides to go and do agriculture and starting a farm or working in that space. While there are many success stories out there which are highly publicized, and it is a very important field, from your experience and what you have seen, what opportunities in terms of employment does agriculture offer to farmers or somebody who is looking to move into that space?
In general, when you speak about agriculture, most of the people who are not the producers, the owners, I can say, who stay away from the farm are all educated people. They have other livelihoods as well. Apart from owning the lands, they just lease out the land and live away from the land. So they do not contribute much, or they may contribute in a very large manner with lot of mechanization and planning. So that is one aspect of it. Second thing is growing something organic or naturally, as we call in India, where the farmers who are educated, they understand better. They immediately grasp the dynamics and they adapt very well compared to farmers who are not very well educated because they do not understand many things. Now, the educated farmers, mostly what I have come across are mostly software engineers. They have made a lot of money and they have been very successful. In fact, many of my students who attended my course on natural farming, they have been very successful across the country, I can say, where they have established very good farms and they are making quite a lot of money, and they have also become master trainers. They have become mentors. They have become resource persons to the government as well. So they have hit in a very big way in farming. But unfortunately, a common farmer, an illiterate or who does not have access to much of technology and information, those people are still lagging behind. That's what I can say.
So when I walk into a supermarket, I see all the varieties of vegetables, all the varieties of fruits available. I have the choice to pick what I want, the quantity, and take what I want for billing. But when it comes to a farmer, how do they decide on what to grow? It is highly improbable to think that a farmer is growing every single thing, and it is a very important decision as to what crop they are going to have for a particular season. In your experience, how do you think farmers decide on what to grow?
Farmers normally decide as per the crops they grow historically, So especially when you go and talk to very small farmers, they will simply copy what their fathers and ancestors, their forefathers have done. So when you take a Kharif season, they will be very fixed in their view as to what they have to grow. They will not change it unless and until they had a major mishap or a complete washout or a complete drought which has destroyed the crops. Otherwise they stick to their old traditions. Traditionally the crops that they have been growing, but they do not understand that sometimes they even copy what their peer is doing, their neighbor is doing. So in this manner, sometimes they end up producing the same produce in a large quantity, and ultimately the prices crash. So they don't understand the dynamics of the market, what the consumer prefers preferences are. What needs to be done and what need not be done, that particular analysis, that particular knowledge is not available with them. So they go blindly by what they have been doing as per their practice. But educated farmers whom I have come across, they adapt very well. They know what are the market dynamics, what is expected as of now, and which produce commands the price, and in that manner they are faring much better. But all farmers do not grow everything. But when you talk about natural farming, or say first let's talk about the chemical fertilizers. Now chemical fertilizers have advocated this monocropping, that is very much there. If supposing they are going to put maize, they will put maize all across. And if they are going to grow paddy, they grow only paddy. But when it comes to natural farming, it is a combination of crops, multi-cropping, mixed cropping, intercropping. That's very essential, not only for the cropping pattern, but for also to enrich the soil and to fight against disease, the pest. So they will have pest repellent crops, they will have trap crops, they will have some border crops, they will have some wind breaking trees on the borders. So it's such a combination. So in this combination, it's a win-win situation, I feel, because if there is no market for one kind of a produce, there will certainly another produce will fetch the market. It's like an insurance, one crop against the other. And similarly, the pests do not destroy all crops. A particular pest will destroy a particular crop. So again, it is an insurance, I say. And then coming to floods or drought, or each aspect, this phenomenon will have a different effect on the crops. So this way, when I see natural farming with multi-cropping, they fare better and they grow a number of crops. But as you see in your supermarket, you have everything. Supermarket, you should understand, they aggregate everything. They bring it to the shelf for the customers, for which they charge you all. So a farmer cannot afford to do such a thing unless he is a very big farmer having a contract in place and sure to sell. Otherwise, small fragmented farmers, a common farmer, will grow maybe 2 or 3 crops, not more than that.
You mentioned a lot of terms over there, and all of those are quite fascinating, and we'll be talking more about each one of that aspect in the subsequent editions. Now, as you mentioned, there will be many instances where there is more supply than there is demand, which is obviously going to lead a lot of produce which is unsold. So what generally happens with all of that unsold produce?
As there is not a well-established agriculture marketing system in our country, except for the Markfed, which the government has put in place. So the small farmers, they tend to take the produce to the market and they try to sell it. If they are lucky enough, they get a price. Otherwise, they sell it mostly to the middlemen at whatever price that they get, because by then they get vexed with all the labor that they do in the farm and they just want to dispose of their produce. So sometimes most of the times I can say they lose a lot of money. And when there is a huge produce and they are not able to sell, as you must have seen in TV, sometimes they show that they dump everything on the ground and go. Like, they pour all the milk and go when there is no market, or they throw all the tomatoes or potatoes or whatever produce which is in excess, and the market, they are not able to get the rate that they are expecting of. Sometimes the cost of production may be, say, per kg 20 rupees, but the market may offer them only 2 rupees so it's a very big, huge gap and a mismatch where the farmers are very distraught, disappointed. So they just dump it and go. So a lot of such things happen, very common it is, especially in horticulture crops. Whereas agriculture crops, at least the farmer has got time to hold the crop and sell it later on. Whereas the perishable ones, the vegetables, the fruits, the milk products, all these need to, they don't have much shelf life. So the farmer wants a ready market for that. That market, that strengthening of the market needs to happen. Otherwise, they end up, dumping everything and going.
I want to ask you if there are facilities or if there are ways in which the excess produce can be preserved. But before I do that, as you were speaking, you mentioned how some of the educated people, engineers who move into farming have better knowledge about technology, and technology is something that is changing everything, right from the way in which we are purchasing our food and to the way in which you and I are recording this discussion and putting it online. When it comes to tech, is there any tech interventions or technology that is helping farmers or making their lives easier?
Now we have a lot of technology, and that's also being reached out through various agencies to the farmers. Now now they have the drones, they have a mechanism by which they can post the problems to a certain group of people or the tech people who give them instant solutions. So the lot of AI and machine learning have been incorporated now into agriculture, but that doesn't reach everybody. What I have observed is all the aspiring farmers, the educated farmers, they somehow get hold of it. One beautiful thing that has reached the farmers, which I'm very happy it has reached almost all the farmers, is they used to get up somewhere in the middle of the night when the power used to be there to put the pump on so that the fields get watered. So, but now they have a gadget or in their own mobile where from their home they can operate the pump and pump the water into the fields. So the farmer need not get up and go in the middle of the night. Such facilities are there, and there are some facilities where the machine learning, with the help of that, they are able to give solutions to the pest problems and to other problems. And then there are some technology that has come up to scare away the wild animals, the wild boars, the birds, the monkeys. So like that, certain gadgets and this knowledge is there, but it has to reach everybody. For that, a lot needs to be done in India. That's what I feel. So here, I feel the educated ones have access to knowledge. It's quite natural because they come to know about it and they access it much before the common general farmer does.
And one of the simpler technology that has been around even in our homes is a refrigerator, and cold storages are something which are now more available even across the globe, where you want to have some of it produced, preserved and stored. Jumping back to the aspect of preserving and saving all of that excess produce, are there ways in which farmers, from your experience and what you have seen, are there ways in which they can preserve their produce, and how many of them actually have access to all of these facilities and these options?
So as I said, agriculture produce can be preserved. Horticulture's shelf life is not more than a week. So it is waste to even invest in such preservation. That's what I feel, because it's not going to fetch you. But agriculture produce, as I have an example to tell you. In 2020, when the coronavirus broke out and the farmers were ready with the chili produce, and a lot of chilies go to China from India. We export a lot of chilies. So what happened was, because of their supply chain, there was disrupt in supply chain, and China blocked and China could not take it. So the market crashed. And when the market crashed, the farmers kept their chilies. This is one example I'm giving you. There may be a lot of examples out there, but they kept the chilies in the cold storage. And what I feel is, in all the main towns, there are cold storages where small fee is charged and the farmers can keep their produce, especially all the spices and some of the produce like pulses, spices. They are all kept in the cold storage. And then the farmer avails this facility and sells it at a time when the market is good enough, when he feels that he can sell it. So they hold the produce. So again, I come to this point that only agriculture produce, which are the grains, the oil seeds, the spices, these can be preserved for some time, whereas the horticulture crops, they cannot be preserved beyond a week's time. That's why it is being dumped.
Like most of the questions that I've been asking, all of these require a lot of in-depth knowledge, and we will be getting into that. The next thing that I want to ask you about are the challenges that farmers face. Often we see in media that there is either drought or floods, which is lack of water or excess water, something that is always shown as a challenge. But if you could mention at least a few high-level aspects apart from these two, which have a significant impact and which throw a huge challenge to farmers and to agriculture in general.
There are many things apart from this. There are disease, the pest attack. See, when the climate changes, naturally there will be change in the activity of the pest. The pest become, more active and they attack the plants. So pest, then you have the disease, and then you have the menace of the wild animals, the birds. This I've seen across the country. It is really very disappointing because overnight the birds will eat away everything. When I was in Namakkal training the farmers there, I saw the main problem that the farmers had was neither it was disease nor drought nor floods. It was the peacocks that were destroying the crops. So they were all waiting for me to to tell them some solution how to overcome this problem. Similarly, when I was in North Haryana, Rajasthan, they had these huge wild boars coming in and also these nilgai, the huge ones. They come and they destroy everything and go within no time. So again, when you see in Andhra, I have seen these wild boars just entering your farm and destroying the crops overnight. The monkeys again, that's also another problem. So these are the various ways in which the crops get destroyed. Apart from this, the lack of labor. This is another aspect which nobody takes into account. When the crops are all ready to be harvested, when the farmer does not get the labor, even then there is a loss of crop, because without labor you cannot harvest. So this has become a very big problem now across India. Lack of labor is also causing a major destruction and loss in crop.
Finally, one last question as we close out this edition, and you just mentioned this, and this is a conversation that is happening across the globe, and that is climate change. Do you see an impact of climate change on farming?
Yes, very much. And I see it because I am dealing with a project where it has hit the project very badly now because of we are growing chilies, and there has been continuous rain. Even today it rained. Chilies don't grow in a humid condition, but it needs very hot condition. And this rain, untimely rain, and this elongated or prolonged monsoon, what we are seeing right now, it is causing the destruction. Either it is drought or heavy rains or the floods or the untimely rain or the extended weather. All this has an impact on the produce. Not only chilies, when you see the late onset of winter or the extension of summer, all this has an impact on the crops. And what is likely to be the time of the flowers to bloom, the grains to set in, and for the harvest to happen, all this get disrupted. And more so this year, we have seen this extended monsoon has caused a lot of havoc, and 30 to 40% of crops have been destroyed. And the farmers are not able to gear up now. They don't know what to do. Most of them have removed the crops and there's a complete loss. And some of them have switched over to some other variety which can withstand this. And some of them have not only switched on to some other variety, but they are trying to dispose of quickly whatever they can salvage now. This is the right now scenario. So this is hitting the livelihood of farmers very badly. So what I feel is, if you have to combat this, you really need a plan in place, and that plan should be to understand the pattern of the weather and then plan accordingly with the beginning of your crop season to your varieties that you grow, and you see that these varieties will withstand this kind of an uncertainty. This is what I understand now, but going forward, maybe we all have to think about, people who are involved in this have to really think and give a proper guidance to the farmers how best they can overcome this kind of a climate change.
On that note, we are closing out this podcast, and like I said at the start, each one of these topics is a huge topic of discussion. We'll be getting into it into the subsequent editions of this podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Abhishek.